Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back.
Okay, all you citizens of the world, welcome back to Live from the Heartland for the week of October 19th, the year 2024. And it gives me real pleasure to bring on the next guest, the one and only Clem Balanoff. And he is the National Political Director of the Amalgamated Transit Union. And I thought of him when I was thinking about the role of labor in the current election. And I asked him if he would come on and talk about that. He said, sure, and a number of other things he'd like to talk about. What got me going was this tale of the two Seans. You know, there's the Sean O'Brien from the Teamsters and the Sean Fain from United Auto Workers, and they couldn't have more different positions. The Teamsters didn't endorse anyone for the presidential race, although some local Teamster groups did announce that they endorse Harris. And that's roughly 24 locals and joint councils that represent about 1 million Teamsters, and they came out for the president. So after saying all that, Clem, can you give us a little hint about what was going on and the difference between those two?
Well, I'm not always sure what was going on, but the Teamsters historically have been a much more conservative union when it comes to endorsements. And locally, we have one of their international vice presidents, Juan Campos from Local 705, great guy, good friend. He led the district council or the region. It's called, what's it called? Something 25, I believe, to endorse Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. The leadership of the Teamsters said that their members voted almost 60% to endorse Donald Trump. I don't know. I've talked to a few Teamsters, and they never were polled or got any information on that. But that's what they say. But they did make no endorsement, and they're a very large union, so certainly it's not a good thing. But look, when the AFL-CIO has done some internal polling of union members, in some cases, Pennsylvania is an interesting state. Kamala Harris was behind 2 points in their polling among union members in Pennsylvania. Interestingly, Sean O'Brien comes out of TDU, supposed to be the more progressive and the left of the Teamsters. So that was a little bit of a surprise. Even the fact that they, wanted to play the game of having a poll, whether they did or not, I don't know that. The auto workers, on the other hand, certainly are strongly for Kamala Harris. And I think that, there's some of the things that Donald Trump has said about him. And I pulled up a few quotes from Donald Trump, and they were from September of 2023 in response to the UAW strike. And for the record, they got an incredible contract. The membership approved it overwhelmingly. The leadership negotiated a good contract. And what Trump said was things like the auto workers are being sold down the river by their leadership, and their leadership should endorse Trump. Auto workers are not going to have any jobs because of all these cars are going to be made in China. The electric cars automatically are going to be made in China. He wasn't a fan of them. And now all of a sudden, because Elon Musk is supporting him, he's a big fan of electric cars. And he says stuff like the heads of the unions are out of touch with their rank and file. And it goes on and on and on. His knocking unions. I mean, look, the bottom line is he's a union buster, and he'd just as soon see all the unions go away. When I say that, there was something called the PRO Act, the Protect the Right to Organize. And passed the House. You will remember that one. And not one, I repeat, not one Republican was for it. Now, in the Senate, it never came up for a vote because the thing was they had to get 50, and there were 3 senators, Democrats at the time, who were on the fence or weren't supportive. A couple of them in Arizona, Kristen Sinema and Mark Kelly. Mark Kelly's now come around. When you were considering him for vice president, all of a sudden he had a change of heart and decided he was in favor of the PRO Act because the union said, hey, if you have this guy, we got problems. And then there's Mark Warner in Virginia, and none of them would sign on. So our hope is, that, and as I said, I pointed out the fact that no Republican was in support of these things. And Donald Trump certainly has, in many cases, has, because of his importance in the Republican Party, has, told them don't vote for certain things. And I'm sure that the PRO Act is one of those kind of votes that he's made it clear that they shouldn't be voting for. Not that Republicans vote for it anyways, but, those are because they're really been anti-union.
What's your view as to the state of the presidential race, including recent polling? Although polling is polling, and so how do you see it from Labor's point of view and beyond, the general state of things?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Labor thinks of it in very similar in terms of where the race is at this point in time. And I do talk about polling because polling, it's a snapshot of what's going on at a specific time. And it's also based on the quality of the poll. It's not just saying all polls are equal because they're not. But right now, they say that Harris has about a 1.7 percentage lead nationally. And to put that in perspective, in 2020, on this date in 2020, Joe Biden was up 8.9%. In 2016, Hillary Clinton was up at this point in time 5.5%. So at this point in time, it appears that this race could be much closer. James Carville, who I don't agree with philosophically, but his perspective is always interesting, said that if she does not win by 4% nationally, he believes she will lose this race. Now, in the swing states, though, there's a much different picture. The race is in the states of Pennsylvania. They have Trump up by 0.3%, North Carolina 1.4%, Georgia 0.7%, Arizona 1.1%, Michigan by 1%, and Nevada by 0.5%. That's under real clear politics. And the and 538 has it in a couple of cases a little or an even. And so what it shows is that this election is really at this point in time probably a dead heat. And we have to win in order for Kamala Harris to win. We have to win the blue wall, which is Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, and the one seat in Nebraska, because Nebraska gives out their electoral votes slightly differently. They do it by congressional districts in part. And there's one district right around Omaha, which Democrats are doing extremely well in, the Democratic candidates. So I think that, but that's what she has to win. That gets her to 270. And, it's interesting because people like Nate Silver from 538, 2 weeks ago, he said he'd rather have Kamala Harris's hand to play. Now he says it's 50-50. Where James Carville said 2 or 3 weeks ago, he thought that the race was Kamala's to lose. Now he says he's not a fan of the way she's been handling things because he didn't believe she should be sitting for so many interviews. And the reason is that because the interviewer can ask you whatever they want, and that could hurt her. He says that she needs to focus more on really beating up Trump for what he said. The Cook Political Report said that, Harris has a slight lead, but the underlying voting trends favor Trump. That's in there. She was talking specifically, Amy Walters, about Pennsylvania. And, but one of the things I think in Pennsylvania that I think is interesting is we have to remember both John Fetterman and Josh Shapiro won handily in Pennsylvania just a few years ago. So, I think that there's some reason there's definitely reason for hope. But
what gives you some optimism around all this?
Well, I think turnout will be key. When I say that, I really mean, whoever has a better voter turnout operation. And I think Democrats, by and large, have a much better operation to turn voters out. We saw yesterday in Georgia, 300,000 people voted yesterday early on the first day of early voting in Georgia. And it was in 2020, that was less than 150,000. I don't know the exact number. I'm sorry. But it's not now. So that certainly gives us hope when we look at some of the counties where this happened at in Fulton County, which is Atlanta, Cobb County, DeKalb, or as we call it in Illinois, DeKalb. Those are counties that are pretty Democratic, and there was pretty heavy voting there. Now, but we also have to understand that since the pandemic, and as early voting and non-election day voting gets easier, more and more people are going to be voting early. Like there probably this election, people feel that more than 60% of people will cast their ballots non-election day. Now, in some states, they mail everybody a ballot because they're trying to get away from election day voting. But still in all, it will be more than half of the electorate, could be 65% will vote non-election day. And that means that elections become more expensive because you have to campaign for a much longer period of time. And, that's a whole different topic, is how things are funded. Because, I mean, I think, Michael, that myself, as you, David Orr, and many others really do believe that we need David Melton, that we really do need campaign finance reform in this country if we're going to win. Because too often, the very wealthy are more and more controlling elections.
Well, Clem Balanoff, let me ask you, what are some important issues that people say will help them decide who to vote for?
Sure. It's the, for Democrats, one of the better issues is abortion. And many people have said, in an NBC story just yesterday, or CNBC's MSNBC story yesterday, they were talking about, for Democrats and for Kamala Harris, that is the top issue. That they will vote on. And in the Senate race in Texas, they say in Texas, 75 or 80% of people are in support of abortion, of the right to choose for women making their own decisions. For Donald Trump, his people would like him to be talking about immigration and the economy. Now, it's interesting because, I mean, the economy, prices are up, wages are up, not quite as much. And certainly, but if you compare it to, like the past and Republicans as a whole, the working men and women do much better when Democrats are president than Republicans as a whole. So I think those are, three issues. In some states, there are other issues, and certainly Palestine and Michigan, very, very important. And, it's, people like myself, I don't believe that Harris and Biden have the right position. But, but I think that's where those are, four issues that I think are going to really are on people's minds and are going to help determine, the winner. And then
let me just say around the Palestine question, I really think it's problematic for Israel in the world for generations now, I think, in the future. And I think here, let's just talk about the Democratic Party, which we're involved with, but necessarily don't always agree with some of the Big Ten pictures, that I think that younger people are from the get, pretty pro-Palestine, and are less inclined to support Democrats or be involved in the actual party processes. So I think that's an issue that the Democrats are going to have to deal with. And I do think that Kamala Harris really needs to sort of separate herself a little bit on that issue and say something good. Yeah, well, she has, but, it's mired in a lot of other stuff.
Yeah, well, I was kind of disappointed when she was on The View, in the last week, and they said, is there anything that you differ with Joe Biden on? And she thought of it, and she says, no, I can't think of anything. I mean, it's difficult. And it's not to say that many things that Joe Biden did aren't very good. Look, I come from the Amalgamated Transit Union. We represent bus drivers and train operators across the United States. In the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, there was $107 billion, the biggest infusion of cash into public transit in the history of this country. We got additional safety protections, and he's been great to transit workers. But there are things that certainly she should be separating herself from. And unfortunately, too often we see her kind of separating and going to the right as opposed to going to the left, but because she's trying to win an election. And, although I think that elections are about contrast, I mean, you can't get far enough to the right to get a gun nut. She can say, hey, somebody comes to my house, I'm going to shoot him. But you can't, she's not going to be able to pick up the NRA sorts. And so she should really stick to her, her positions, and I think, show the very serious differences, including the threat to our democracy. I mean,
yeah. Well, you're not the only one that's saying that. We hope that in the next 3 weeks, and that's about all we have left, that she does take a stronger position on some of this stuff.
Right. Well, I mean, I think she has to take a stronger position. She also has to be more attacking of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
There are many people have now said, and Barack Obama was talking about black men and black men voting, and she's trailing where Joe Biden was in 2020 among black men. And I think one of the things, all they have to do is they have to say, hey, look, let's talk about Donald Trump in his own words and what he said, and take half a dozen quotes and put them up there and let people know. I mean, I think that the campaign has to be more hard hitting. Or a commercial that was done in 2020 showed a bunch of kids watching TV and different shots, and it was they had quotes that Donald Trump had made. And they said, do you really want your kids to see this? Is this the kind of leader that we want? I mean, good stuff. I don't understand why we don't see more of it now, but I'm certainly very hopeful. And one of the things that I'm on a call weekly with the AFL-CIO political directors, and that's one of the things I think we have talked about, and we're going to really probably have a much more robust discussion about tomorrow, about what individual unions can do specifically about their membership in this, not only in the swing states, but with Black men or some of the undecideds that we have.
Well, I'm going to ask you a little bit about what people can do in the remaining time. But before I do that, let's talk a little bit about the Senate race.
Real quick.
And there's a number of things that are in play for us. We didn't, I've been going to Texas for years now with basketball in the barrio and Athletes United for Peace. And I've heard for 20-something years how it's going to turn blue, and it hasn't quite gone that way. But, Beto O'Rourke is out there working hard for Colin Allred. And, so we have a shot there. It looks like Florida, Nebraska. What do you got on that?
Yeah, well, let me first tell you about this. Initially, there were 7 seats that the Democrats absolutely had to win in order to control the Senate. And those were Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, Michigan, Nevada, and Wisconsin. It looks like we're going to win 6 of the 7. Montana is a really tough state. We're about 7 points behind. I think it's going to be very difficult to win that state. So we had to expand the map. And the 3 that they had looked at, as you very adequately pointed out, were Texas, Florida, and Nebraska. Now, Florida looks like it's kind of slipping away. Texas, on the other hand, the race has tightened up significantly between Colin Allred and Ted Cruz just last night. In the only debate in the race, Colin Allred had an extremely strong debate performance yesterday, which we hope will give him a little bump. But if we lose just Montana, they will control the Senate. And what that means is you won't be able to, the next president, assuming it's Kamala Harris, will not be able to appoint Supreme Court justices or judges at all. They won't be able to, appointments to her cabinet and others that require Senate approval won't happen, or they'll have to be so compromised. We won't be able to change the rules to allow for the codification of Roe versus Wade. It's that type of thing. Nebraska is a very interesting one. It's like, yeah, I know this. It's there's no Democrat running, so Osborne is the de facto a Democrat, and he's running a really strong race. He's the head of the Bakery and Confectionery Workers Local. He's a union guy. Seems like a really good guy. I was talking to his campaign a week and a half ago or so, and they're more optimistic that things are changing. And it's interesting because I hope that, like 2 weeks ago, the presidential race looked like it was trending more towards Kamala Harris. And sometimes when that trend starts stopping, other people start, it stops momentum on other people's, on other races down ballot for U.S. Senate. But it's a very close race. And our hope is certainly that we can either win in Nebraska or Texas, and that'll give us 50-50. And then the vice president, assuming it's Tim Walz, will break the tie. So, it's they're tough, but these races. But look, this is a close election. This country is very, very divided. Sometimes I scratch my head and don't understand why and how anybody could vote for Donald Trump. But I really do.
I'm amazed. I'm blown away that people can, and I realize that people are not watching the same news or reading the same papers that I am. And a lot of people, they don't. So we only got a couple minutes left, Clem, on this segment of Live from the Heartland for the week of October 19th. But I'd like to ask you, what in the remaining days can people of conscience do? Okay.
Well, there are things that you can do from Illinois, and there are things that you can go to one of the swing states. We're closest to Wisconsin. And I tell people, there's buses going all the time. Jan Schakowsky, call her office. She has an opportunity, not her office, her political office. And they have buses every week going up to Wisconsin. If people want to do something, they can get in a car with a couple of friends. And I encourage them to go further north, because a lot of the buses go to the border towns.
Well, Katie Hogan, from the show, they've been going further and further each time.
Yeah. Right. I tell people, if you want to do something, somebody said, well, who should I give money to? I said, look, money doesn't seem to be the issue in these races. get up to Green Bay, knock on a few doors, bring 3 friends, go up to Door County, get out to Eau Claire or to La Crosse, go to a little further north where we're not getting the, tremendous influx of people knocking on doors, but people can write postcards, and there's always postcard writing parties all over the place. You can make calls. There's virtual phone banks to call into all of the swing states and all of the Senate races that are important, that people can do.
I think there are people who could just pick up their phone and call people they know in other states.
Oh, that's right. That's a virtual phone bank, and they do that all the time. And I think that people should do that. It's like, look, get involved a little bit, make a few calls, write a few postcards, get on a bus, drive up there with a couple of friends. It's a nice time. The leaves are changing in northern in Wisconsin, so it's a great trip. You'll have a good time. Hang out with them at night and work on Saturday and Sunday.
Well, you and I, we've been through a lot of elections, and we've had some burners. We've had some that have hurt. We've had some joyous victories, and one way or another, we'll be talking and working together to make this world a little bit better.
Yeah,
we're in a good place here in Illinois, and people should be really grateful for that. And we have to spread it.
Yes. No.
You got any parting words?
Well, no, Michael. Just that you've been fighting in the good fight for God.
I'm old.
70. Well, okay, I'm old too. I tell people. They say, "Why do you have so many stories?" I said, "I'm 71. For Christ's sake, You do a lot of things.
Well, like that. I'm at 82, hitting 83.
Oh, yeah, I know.
We'll be having you back on the show sometime after the election.
I'd love to be. Thank you much.